Hi, folks. All right, so we have the Sun and Venus conjuncting tomorrow. And the Sun-Venus conjunction is always thought-provoking, but it's especially relevant to talk about the Sun-Venus conjunction prior to the Gemini new moon, because the Gemini new moon, in and of itself, and that's occurring on June the 6th, is conjunct Venus and squaring Saturn. So the Sun-Venus conjunction plays an important role as far as this Gemini new moon is concerned. And in general, it's as I mentioned to you in my weekly overview yesterday, it's a conversation, it's a meetup from where we sit between Venus and the Sun. Venus, the planet primarily of money and relationships, and the relationship between the two. As I've said to you before, the relationship, the quality of our abundance is directly connected to the quality of our relationships. And that's a very Venusian idea or concept. What is it that we provide of value, and what is given to us in exchange for it? Underpinning this, of course, with Venus, we have issues related to, when it comes to relationships, to some extent, but fair enough, codependency versus independence. Absolutely, actually, insofar as, and underpinning everything with Venus, it is what we value and what we have that is of value to our values, what we value, what we have to provide that is of value, what we want to protect, what our gifts are, what our abundance is, what our strengths are, in a certain sense, that we would want to nurture and grow and capitalize on. I'm using words that are financial for a reason. And the relationship between Venus and Mars, which is sort of the opposing principles, the feminine principle and the masculine principle, is Venus is what we value, and Mars seeks to protect it and capitalize on it and take action on it. Now, Venus does cover creative pursuits and Venusian topics like luxuries and beauty and beautification and our own personal beautification, or the beauty industry, or interior design, or and for me, Venus has the most direct link to natural flow, that primarily primordial feminine force, by which the grass grows, and the natural way in which things grow and are bountiful. It happens by itself. There's a perceived passivity to it. And Venus, in that regard, becomes a planet of letting go and surrendering and being and letting things come to you, of attracting, as opposed to Mars, which goes out and gets. But again, boiling it down to its essentials, what we value and our relationship to what we value, very important with Venus and Venus cycles. And of course, money and relationships and the link between the two. How abundant do you feel? What is the quality of your abundance? Does it feel stable? Does it feel protected? What is the connection between that and the nature of your relationships? The Sun, as I've mentioned to you before, is our most unsullied connection to Source. There's no mental processing. There's a knowing associated with it. And a direct connection. Wherever the Sun goes, as I've said, it illuminates. It's a spotlight. And all the cobs and cobwebs and nooks and crannies are exposed. And here we have the sign of Gemini, where we currently have the Sun, and Venus is going to conjunct the Sun, and we're going to have the new moon, and Mercury entered here yesterday, and Jupiter is here as well. I did a video on Jupiter's 12-13-month transit through Gemini a couple of videos ago, so you're welcome to check that out if that is of interest to you. So a lot going on in Gemini right now. Some of all of this has to do with trying to get a handle on what ending and new beginning Jupiter would be creating, ending a 12, 13-year cycle, starting a 12, 13-year cycle in the Gemini part of our chart. And we may have some signs, some signals, some push in that direction as a result of the annual solar transit of Gemini, what we popularly call Gemini season, during which the new moon plays an important role. And since we've got Venus and Mercury in Gemini at this point in time, and on June the 6th we have the new moon, we're going to have a 4-week period between June the 6th and July the 5th where some activity is going to be needed of us, required of us in the Gemini portion of our chart. What is the house occupied by Gemini in our birth chart? That is where this activity is taking place. The Sun and Venus meet up every 9 months or so. Every 9 months or so. Venus goes retrograde every 18 months or so. When it comes to conjunctions with the Sun, especially of personal planets, Mercury, Venus, it's when the planet is retrograde and it conjuncts the Sun, what is called an inferior conjunction, that starts to cycle. And when it comes to Venus, there are 2 cycles we need to look at. One is, where does this, what we're experiencing tomorrow is a superior conjunction, where direct Venus conjuncts the Sun. Then Venus is now going to start to move ahead from the Sun. Venus is going to start entering houses before the Sun at this point in time, starting tomorrow. And it's going to keep moving ahead and keep moving ahead and keep moving ahead until it goes retrograde again. And Venus goes retrograde next in March, I think, of next year, in the sign of Aries. It's going to go retrograde into Aries and Pisces, like Mercury around the same time. That is going to be quite a retrograde between Aries and Pisces. And Venus and the Sun meet up in the same 5 signs in succession. Those 5 signs currently are Gemini, Aries, Capricorn, Libra, Leo. And then Gemini, Aries, Capricorn, Libra, Leo at this point in time. The first cycle that we need to look at. Actually, before I talk about the cycles, which I will in a second, sorry, I'm not trying to taunt you. One of the things about Venus and the Sun, with the inferior conjunction, when Venus is retrograde and it conjuncts the Sun, it's a much more obviously thought-provoking time. Because when Venus goes retrograde, we are forced to reassess how we are utilizing our resources in the service of what we value, as opposed to, are we working really hard to maintain a certain set of expenses or certain lifestyle, and is it taking us away from what we value? When personal planets especially move ahead and move quickly, it's natural for them to gallop forward and lose connection with the Sun. When Mercury does this, some of the forward movement gets colored by an inability to see and separate the wheat from the chaff, glossing over intuitive red flags, not being able to see everything clearly. As it moves ahead, Mercury has a tendency to develop or build an element of, or a layer of fantasy over whatever it is trying to achieve. Mercury is going direct. I've applied for 2 jobs. Oh, I think I'm going to get it. Oh, I think I got a first round. I got a second round. I think people like me. Blah, 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 blah. Mercury goes retrograde. Oh, that person there has a favorite that I was not aware of. Or, oh, this is what is really going on with this. Or, oh, this is how people actually feel about this. It feels a lot more real. Data comes to us. Now, I know Mercury retrograde brings other mundane issues like delays and challenges and all that kind of stuff. When Venus goes retrograde, on a most prior to Venus going retrograde, when Venus is furthest away from the sun, and Venus famously goes retrograde for 40 days and 40 nights. I mean, that's how it's always described. And out of all the retrogrades, it's the Venus retrograde that I both welcome and cherish, but also don't look forward to, because it is very often a time of financial constraint. Because Venus is basically saying, okay, look, some of our spending and some of the way in which we're using our resources has gotten out of hand and is no longer aligned with what it is that you value. The same might be true of some of our relationships. The nature and the dynamic on them, the give and take of them, whether or not they align with our values, has gotten out of hand. I've been galloping forward too far, kind of fast. And so things happen. A certain amount of money has been coming in, it's getting spent in certain directions. We've lost contact with what is essential. So Venus goes retrograde and meets up with the sun. Venus, while she's retrograde, means we often have to reassess our spending, our finances, our relationships in connection with what it is that we value. What is our goal? What are our goals? Are we starting to work really hard to meet certain expenditures on a monthly basis, or are expenditures serving our goals? When it's a direct Venus conjuncting the sun, like she is tomorrow, the energy is more yang. It's still a conversation between our financial self and our relationship self with Source. Particularly in this case, in the Gemini part of our chart, the part of our chart, the house in our chart occupied by Gemini and the people who sit there. But one of the 2 cycles connects this superior conjunction to the last inferior conjunction about 9 months ago. And then another one of the cycles connects it to the last inferior conjunction in the sign of Gemini 4 years ago. The last time Venus was retrograde was, of course, in July and August. As I've been maintaining and telling you, April, May, June, July, August of last year, particularly as we headed towards July, and particularly as we were headed to this Venus retrograde, we were getting ready to gallop and move forward in a certain direction, desired direction. And then Venus went retrograde. And then after that, Mercury went retrograde. And then after that, we had the eclipse of release. So since about August, September till the middle of March, March 25th of this year, to be precise, we couldn't move forward in the direction we wanted to. We were thwarted. We had things we needed to attend to. And at that point in time, we did not know and we did not understand that it'll take us a couple of years to actually make this transition, given everything that we're dealing with, because it's a big enough change. And of course, the Venus retrograde and the Venus-Mars conjunction that did not happen, then that finally happened in February, and it was not the only part of this story. Added to this was Jupiter's conjunction with the North Node in Taurus, Jupiter's conjunction with Uranus, which is a significant shift. So we've been in significant shift energy in 2023 and 2024. But Venus conjuncted the Sun retrograde on 13th of August 2023. One of the things to try and contemplate and understand is when it comes to finances and relationships, and just so you know, that conjunction occurred in the sign of Leo, in the Leo part of your chart, 13th August 2023. So one of the things to ponder is between 13th August 2023 and June the 4th of 2024. If you think of June the 4th, 2024 as a kind of a peaking or cresting of Venusian energy, some people refer to, even though Venus is conjuncting the Sun, some people refer to this as a full Venus. There are astrologers who feel that at the time of a superior conjunction to the Sun, Venus operates the way a full moon operates, but in relationship and financial matters. I think there's some kind of truth to that. I think the energy is yang. I think that it is a wave. 13th August of 2023 to 4th of June with regard to, and remember, Venus is also happiness and contentment in relationships. We may have reached a place in the Gemini part of our chart where we have assessed, and we might be at that point where we are just at the cusp of dealing with the reality of who is in and who is out. In the Gemini part of our chart. And it's an energy and an assessment that started because I'm talking about the first cycle here on 13th August of last year. Also, in connection to the fact that that inferior conjunction happened in the sign of Leo, whatever that Venus retrograde may have meant to you in the sign of Leo, you might be coming up against an important milestone, again, a cresting. The highest where the wave is going to go and it crashes to the shore. After tomorrow, yes, Venus starts to move ahead, but the wave starts to pull back again. In terms of there's a kind of a yang phase of Venus, and the yang phase of Venus comes with, what am I doing financially? What am I doing with my relationships? Some part of this discussion is to support the Leo part of the chart, but the characters involved are in the Gemini part of the chart. And as you head to tomorrow, you might be in a place where you feel very clear about, oh, these are the relationships I cherish. These are the people who are adding something to my life and are helping me and are a source of aid. And these are the people who are not and who might actually be hurting me. Now, after 4th of June, the next inferior conjunction will be in the sign of Aries on 22nd March 2025. And something will start to get reassessed in the Aries part of the chart. And that's fine. But one set of energies that is worth thinking about is us galloping forward and galloping ahead. April, May, June, July. And then since August to March 25th, one of the things that happened during that time, but the thing that kickstarted it was Venus going retrograde. And a retrograde Venus met up with the Sun in August. And since then, we've been dealing with this accelerating energy, accelerating wave of reviewing, assessing, growing, investing in financial avenues and the right relationships, which means that as of August the 13th of last year, certain financial avenues closed. And since August the 13th, and getting to a point by tomorrow, certain relationships will also have closed. But that doesn't mean it's not all barren. It's also an identification of what the financial avenues are that are going to remain open, that are going to be invested in, and which friendships and relationships will continue. I should really use the word relationships, because it could be professional relationships. It could be family. It could be romance. Who's in, who's out. And now, from now to March, 22nd March of next year, it's more of an implementation of this, so to speak. It's more of investing in those right financial avenues and directions and those relationships. And tuning out the ones that are outmoded or done, or the relationships that are outmoded or done. The second cycle is more of a pure Venus-Sun conjunction Gemini cycle. It's quite interesting and quite important. And it's happening in 8-year cycles in each of those 5 signs I mentioned. In the sign of Gemini, the last inferior conjunction in the sign of Gemini was on 8th January 2022. Oh no, sorry, excuse me. That does not make sense at all. Does not make sense at all. 3rd June 2020. This is really going to make sense to you and possibly resonate if you know where Gemini is in your chart and which house it occupies. There was a cycle between 2012 and 2020. Relationships, finances. And a cycle then between June the 3rd, 2020 to 2028. And that date will be 1st June 2028. And by the way, these conjunctions in Gemini happen very close to each other. They happen a little bit before every time, the conjunctions are going to move, but slowly. So we are in a cycle where we had an inferior conjunction, Venus retrograde conjuncting the Sun in Gemini on 3rd of June 2020. We're having the corresponding superior conjunction tomorrow on June the 4th, 2024. And we will have the next inferior conjunction on June the 1st, 2028. It is possible that between 2012 and 2020 in the Gemini part of your chart was one set of, and if you want to go even further back, 2004 to 2012, 2012 to 2020, 2020 to 28. And if you look at the Gemini part of your chart and the people who sit there, 2004 to 2012, 2012 to 2020, 2020 to 2028. Depending on the house, either finances or relationships will take greater priority. The inferior conjunction happens. The last time it happened in Gemini was in 2020, June 2020. it starts something based on a reassessment. The superior conjunction happens in the middle of 2024, something peaks or crests, or there's a reevaluation again, a reassessment, and then so it could be from 2004 to 2008, something culminates in 2008 down to 2012. 2012 to 2016, something culminates down to 2020. 2020 to 2024, something culminates 2024 to 2028. The wave starts to come down. It's like a sine wave related to people or topics in the Gemini portion of your chart. With all of that said, ultimately, it's a very simple thing. It's not as inward as when a retrograde Venus and the Sun meet up. Really, the Sun-Venus conjunction could very well just pass us by when it's a superior conjunction. It really could. And you may even think about, insofar as the full Venus, and we've been heading towards it, anything going on creatively that you're, I've just had the sense of things harvesting, but that doesn't mean that the harvest is with us here yet. A sense of things creatively, beautification, Venusian activities reaching a kind of peak. I still think you can't take away relationships and finances. Now, when we have a Sun-Venus conjunction, Venus's powers are always, but ultimately, it's not the same as when Venus is retrograde, when Venus really feels combust, where we are really like, oh my God, where's the financial flow? When it comes to Venus direct and the Sun conjuncting, if you did not know about it, you would just go about your business on a day-to-day basis. You would not realize that you were reaching a milestone, and that milestone was quite decisive, and that what you were really doing and experiencing around the time of that milestone was, as I said, put crudely, who's in and who's out as far as your circle is concerned. And it's reached, regarding the people who are out, you may not be able to articulate this, but it's reached a point of fatigue. And so you may really feel like, you know what, that's done. Those things are done. They're not. But there may also be an appreciation for, wow, these people have really added value or do add value to my life, or are caring, or are thoughtful, or are generous, or are contributing in some way, or I can rely on them, or I can talk to them, or, that kind of stuff. Similarly, with financial opportunities, when you have a direct personal planet like Mercury or Venus conjuncting the Sun, you are reaching, so you can think back to August 2023 to June 2024, and it could, as I said, very much be that financially something started then, a certain stream that has reached a kind of milestone and now needs to be grown, but it's more capitalizing on what has been growing since August of last year. The same can be said perhaps of something creative. And then there's the link up to 4 years ago. If you think about the Gemini part of the chart, who has come into that part of the chart, who gets to continue to stay. and who has exited that part of the chart. The last thing that we cannot ignore is the fact that this Sun-Venus conjunction, and indeed the new moon, square Saturn in Pisces. In many ways, who and what is of value to us in the Gemini part of the chart is going to be a very important factor over the next month as we try and stabilize the Pisces part of our chart. Because it may be, with Venus involved, that there's an avenue, a job, an opportunity, a person, people, relationships, something that we're able to capitalize on and build and need to act on and build over the next 4 weeks, need to welcome in, need to concretize. That doesn't mean that you sign the first thing that comes to you. I mean, I'm not saying that there isn't room for negotiation, that you don't blah, 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 blah. But there could be something, especially as we head past the new moon on June the 6th, that appears that requires action to help Saturn stabilize the Pisces part of your chart. If you want more on that, you're going to have to wait for the new moon video that I'm going to do tomorrow or the after. I might take a break tomorrow. I don't know. Probably tomorrow. That's when I should do it. And you can look at my weekly overview from yesterday as well. But there's something about the Sun-Venus conjunction occurring tomorrow on the 4th of June, 2 days before that new moon that's conjunct Venus, that is significant, where there's a conversation between whatever realization or opportunity is present with Venus. Opportunity, and that's the one thing with Venus, whichever house she's transiting, she brings solutions and peace and the potential for harmony and the potential for opportunities and relationship or financial opportunities or openings or assistance. She does. It makes you feel like this is how it should normally be. There are those two cycles to link into if you want to think about creatively, but especially financially and with relationships, what has been going on since August of last year, what has been going on since June of 2020. 2 cycles. The first cycle from August is going to take us to March, April of 2025. And the second cycle that started in 2020 takes us to 2028. But insofar as Saturn is expecting, needs, requires opportunity, help, assistance, action, communication, now that Mercury is in Gemini, the concretization of plans. And tied to this, we can't forget that Jupiter is also in Gemini, endings and new beginnings. It's lovely to have Jupiter in Gemini in the same year as a conjunction, like, it wouldn't surprise me if we've had that before, but actually wouldn't surprise me at all if Jupiter has been doing this. If we go back to 2012, I think that's where Jupiter was. Wasn't Jupiter in Gemini in 2012? Anyway, helping to act a little bit like an Etch-a-Sketch. What needs to go, what needs to stay, then this conversation is very much part of that dynamic. But on a more immediate level, who and where do you lean on to help stabilize the Pisces part of your chart? Who sits in the Gemini portion of your chart? Okay, amigos, things to think about, just things to think about. Venus's orbit around the sun. Venus is closer to the sun than we are. To us, of course, it looks like from where we sit that Venus and the sun are going around us. The speed of Venus's orbit around the sun, the fact that it's so much faster, and she keeps conjuncting the sun every 9 months or so, is what gives rise to, from our side, this kind of rose pattern where she keeps meeting up with the sun in these 5 signs. Direct, retrograde, direct, retrograde, direct, retrograde, direct, retrograde. It's a beautiful pattern. And I'm sure if you Google sort of Venus under, someone will show you what it means. That's what not helps create, that's what creates, from our perspective, this so-called Venusian rose pattern. And what happens every 8 years is that Venus reaches not the exact same point in each of these signs, but darn close to it. Hope I've given you something to reflect on, think about. If you found this video useful, feel free to share, tell your friends about the channel, etc. If you would like me to take a look at your birth chart and do a reading for you, my email address is in the description box below. You can contact me there for rates. There is a thanks button. If you want to contribute to the channel, you can use that. Please feel free to subscribe to my YouTube channel. Thank you to all the subscribers and supporters and everyone who has actually used the thanks button recently. I'm not saying that to encourage. It's a sincere thanks. It never ceases to, especially since January. Those of you who've been with me for a while will know how appreciative I am of the growth and support that this channel has received. You can click on the subscribe button to subscribe. Next to the subscribe button is a bell icon. If you hover over it, you'll see a wiggly bell. If you click on that, you'll be notified whenever I do new videos. The next video I'm going to do is on the new moon in Gemini. It's time. Be patient with yourselves over the next 48 hours. Energy may be low. The moon is dark. And as we head towards Thursday, it may be really hard to fight that kind of feeling of depression, hopelessness that comes to us within 48 hours before a new moon. So you're just going to have to guard against that. The new moon will happen and the energy will come back. Okay, thanks for your time and attention. Take care.